We are very grateful tonight for our predecessors and our ancestors on these lands, the Aboriginal Salish, Klishpe, and Tsanka peoples who have called this place home since time immemorial. And we are grateful for their continuing teaching us how to be good to this place we now call home and how to be good to each other. I'm Raphael Chacon. I'm director of the Montana Museum of Art and Culture, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to a panel discussion on based on the artists in 19 Under 39, an exhibition that officially closes tomorrow. In fact, some of the work was coming off the walls today, and it was a kind of a sad thing. But we have been, tonight's panel discussion is in some ways the culminating event from 6 months of having this amazing exhibition in our space. It's been a pleasure to get to know 19 exceptional artists and to share their unique visions and to also have the privilege of having their art in our midst. It's been kind of amazing. So these artists represent, as many of you know, the cutting edge of a younger generation of Montana artists. And we are, of course, here because these artists continue to inspire us and to challenge us, which is a wonderful thing. I also want to make note that, and by the way, you're seeing some of the art that's in that exhibition, or at least until tomorrow. We are actually here because of two other very important individuals that I want to acknowledge. And so I want to lift up two U of M alumni, Lauren and Michelle Hansen. And these folks have made all of this possible. You see, this multifaceted exhibition was really their brainchild and their sort of dream project. And it's really their generosity that's allowed us to do this exhibition and to make it a biennial exhibition. So this will happen again in short order. They inspired us to not just collect the art of this younger generation, 19 artists under the age of 39, but also to promote their work, to celebrate their work, and to encourage their work. And they did that through offering purchase awards, so money prizes that would in fact help these young artists with their careers, in some cases launch careers, expand careers, take their careers in new directions. That's their vision. They're folks that acknowledge that the MMAC, this museum, has a sterling collection of historic art, you know, from ancient objects to old masters, and but they also understood that we have never had the capacity to collect contemporary art and collect it well and collect it in our own time, collect the art of our own time in our own time. So this exhibition, this project, this idea that the Hansens had really is the result of that. So every 2 years we will put out an invitation, we'll put out a call, invite artists in this age bracket to show their work, to represent themselves, and then a selection committee will come together, we'll make the selections, and then there will be 19 new artists for us to look at, or maybe some of you will come back in the next round. We'd love to see what happens to your careers. This idea of collecting great art but also supporting young artists is really why we're paying tribute to the Hansens. And they sent their regrets. They couldn't be here tonight. They've had some health issues. So, and they wanted above all to acknowledge you folks and to tell you how proud they are that you're here and that you're taking part in this exhibition. So. It was Michelle Hansen who came up with the title 19 Under 39. For a while, we pushed for 20 Under 40. And we realized that that's been used all over the place, right? But 19 Under 39 had this kind of odd number kind of quirk to it. And Michelle reminded us that Jack Benny, and some of you know who Jack Benny was, some like old-timey guy. But anyway, Jack Benny actually said that nobody should age beyond the age of 39. And I don't know what he meant by that, but anyway, so that it was Michelle's idea that we should name it 19 Under 39. And I love it because they have a sense of humor, both of them. And Lauren's perennial joke about this exhibition was that it's a good thing it wasn't 39 under 19. Just think about that for a minute. So lastly, before I hand the mic over to our moderator, I want to thank the Montana Museum of Art and Culture staff, especially Derek Witcherly, Eileen Rafferty, and Tracy Hall, for their inordinate efforts to pull this exhibition together. I also want to thank Peggy Nesbitt from the College of the Arts and Media, and Allison Schultz of the U of M Foundation, who worked tirelessly on this exhibition. Also, many thanks to the selection committee, which was comprised of the curator at Paris Gibson Square Museum, Nicole Evans, who is also our moderator this evening, art professor Frank Finley from Salish Kootenai College, Alyssa Kost, who is the executive director of MAGDA, the Montana Art Gallery Directors Association, Kia Lisak, who is a development officer with the U of M Foundation, and myself and our associate curator, Derek Witcherly, formed that selection committee. So let's have a round of applause for those folks who had some very, very tough choices to make in this whole process. And we should applaud the artists who are here. Actually, Nicole is going to introduce us, but thank you all for being here. So let's have a round of applause for them. And I also want to take note, before I pass the mic on to Nicole, that we are filming this for the Missoula MCAT, Missoula Community Access Television. So that's being filmed this evening. So thank you all for being here. We are going to do a Q&A afterwards. So Nicole will let us know when that's going to take place. So Nicole, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you, Raphael. And actually, Raphael is going to let me know when it's 6:15. And then we'll start with the Q&A. The way that I'd like to arrange this moderated question and answer type of situation is I'd like to begin by having the artists introduce themselves briefly. And I think that's because that way that gives you all an introduction to who they are through their own voice. And many of you have had a chance to listen to them speak at the exhibit. So thank you for being there and witnessing that as well. My name is Nicole. I am the curator at Paris Gibson Square Museum of Art, and I'm honored to be here to have this conversation with all of you. And thank you for all your patience, and I hope you enjoy this. So I'm going to go ahead and start, and if you could just speak a little about who you are and your prize position as well.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Aspen Decker. My Indian name is Shining Camas Woman. I'm a member of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, and I do indigenous ledger art, and I got the winning prize of this 19 under 39. So much.
My name is Maya Clough. I am a ceramic sculptor. The work featured in the show here was 3 pieces. That's me right there. What good timing. That's my work. And I received the 2nd place prize.
My name is Grace Brogan. I work at the intersection of traditional craft and contemporary sculpture. And I received the 3rd place purchase prize.
My name's Rachel Marjama. I'm from Butte, and I'm originally a fiber artist, but my work featured in this show are my ceramics and paintings inspired by fiber art, and I'm the People's Choice winner.
To begin this discussion, I do want to say that in advance of this, we all kind of spoke together and had a little discussion about what are the things that are most fascinating or interesting to the artist and worth a conversation and worth digging into so that everybody can have a little bit of an insight into what are the things that are motivating artists, what are the things that are critical issues, and what are the things that motivate them to give positive or negative advice to students moving forward, or maybe imagine what the future could be. So we're going to start a little bit with a bit of some easy questions, things that are easy for the artist to digest and communicate about, and things that are easy for the audience to kind of digest as well. So I'm going to begin with kind of a few general questions. And the first one for you, and feel free, all of you in this take, to go ahead and answer. Some of them I will direct specifically to a few of the artists, but this one is for all of you. As young artists develop their work, they're often asked to experiment and find their own unique style. What initially drew you to your specific area of interest as an artist, and what is your advice to young artists finding their style?
I can jump in. My work that I'm doing currently was actually inspired by that little girl sitting here in the audience, my oldest daughter, Isla. I gave birth to her in the middle of my bachelor's degree. It was like on summer break between my second and third year. And so that was a very pivotal point in my life as far as just personal life events that really influenced my work. Previously, when I think about kind of where I was as a student in those first 2 years of my bachelor's, I was trying to, again, like you were saying, kind of explore as much as I could, and it was very much under this kind of larger theme of family relations, kind of some genealogical themes that were coming in. And then when I went through that experience of becoming a mother, all of a sudden, it really hyper-focused. Oh, here's all of these interests that I was already exploring, and then this is what I want to dive into. So I suggest just kind of, again, remaining open to that experimentation, but kind of look at even sometimes you'll be making work and it feels very disparate. But often you can see themes coming through even in these kind of like big gaps that you're doing in those in that student realm.
I might follow that up because some of it sounded familiar and some of it I depart in my journey. I came into my bachelor's practicing mostly in two-dimensional art. That's what I was most familiar with, kind of playing with. As a young person, I was making a lot of art, but I had access to pens and pencils and paint mostly growing up. And then there was this opportunity to really dabble during my bachelor's. And I was exposed to, there was a really strong pottery, functional ceramic history at the college that I went to. And that kind of started to imbue a curiosity about this theme that we might come back to about what is art and what is craft. A real desire to know where my materials come from, and to kind of play with the materiality of our world, both abstractly and considering how it impacts our lives, but also the real physical experience we have with art. There you go. And then for me, it kind of was a long journey where I was, after my bachelor's, paying off student loans and working in the nonprofit sector and continuing to study with craftspeople, but still a lot of dabbling and taking bits and pieces over time. And eventually I was kind of returning to where I am now to develop this kind of language, this visual language. But when you kind of said that time to explore, it really was important. And mine ended up being over quite a long span of time to bring me where I am.
I want to interject on that and say, so in that process, do you think you should feel a pressure to find this style? Do you think that is something that students should be concerned about? Or it sounds like there are different events or experiences or even the passage of time that really kind of moves you in that direction. What are your feelings about that pressure?
That brings to mind, I had a conversation with my BFA advisor who very much understood who I was and kind of a planner and thinking about kind of like he knew that I needed the structure and that playing and experimentation was very stressful to me. And he said, plan time to experiment. Give yourself 6 months to just not care about what you make, because that's going to be the time that you're trying to find the gems. And so it can be really hard to experiment and push yourself into different media, especially when you get comfortable and you find something that you like. So, you can always plan for that experimentational period in your practice.
I can speak to it a little bit, but I want to make sure there's time for everyone too. But for me, I can see where there might have been some pressure in the hopes of making a living as an artist right out of the gate. But I'm also thankful, and I can't really imagine another way that I could have come to where I am, that I did have this stretch of time where I was learning a lot from a lot of different craftspeople that informed what I make today and give me different skills and different frames of mind to bring to my work. So I understand the pressure, but I also, I think, appreciate that the journey we're on is what brings us to where we are, and it wouldn't be the same work if it hadn't taken that time.
Okay, guess I'll go. But no, so I do ledger art, and I feel like within our indigenous communities, a lot of us are really connected to our identity and who we are as Skedliw in our community. So for me, it's always been a part of this kind of natural transition into using our oldest designs that are still here today that connect us to our ancestors. And so it's a form of being able to have our oral tradition, our culture, our language brought forward through art. So that's why ledger art, I feel, is so important, especially for indigenous artists, to be able to use that as a way of articulating yourself. Who's your identity? What's these stories that you know? And so what I would say to upcoming artists and artists that are trying to still find their way is to always go back to who you are. So because I inform and share these stories of my people, and we see a lot of Native art now really being represented, it's not for outside tribal community members to take our stories or our designs or our aesthetics. And so that's where knowing your own personal identity is so important. And I know a lot of people are still finding their way, especially when they're young, but you'll never go, onto the wrong path, I guess, doing art, as long as you follow who you are and you're not taking and culturally appropriating from other Japanese, indigenous, all these other minority groups, and really just focusing on your own culture. Because all of us have family stories and something that's important to ourselves, the way that we had our upbringing. So if you focus on that, you're going to be authentically yourself. And you could dabble and, kind of figure out the type of artwork you like. But I think always knowing where you come from and where your foundation is always going to lead you in the right way.
And I'm going to say thank you. And also, following that question, I'm going to gear it over to you, Rachel. And if you can kind of piggyback off of that last question, but also think about this in regards to the last question about style and finding yourself and what your opinion is about that, but also intertwined in that, can you share a moment in your life as an artist that completely changed your perspective about being an artist or making art?
So I was originally a fiber artist. I was a tech editor for knitting patterns and a knitting pattern creator. And it was mostly out of necessity because I needed artwork that could travel with me because I worked in agriculture. And a big moment for me that kind of brought me out of staying within the fiber art realm was hurting my back and getting sick, and I needed to change my career. And I think it's important to enjoy the process of learning and enjoy the process of creating. And I think it's easy for me to say because I'm a fiber artist, and it takes a very long time to make a sock. It takes a very long time to knit a sweater. But I always harken back to just enjoying the process of learning and the process of like teaching other people. And I had to make this hard switch when I hurt my back because I was also taking care of my great-grandmother. And she ended up not wanting me to knit, but I realized this because she wanted to be involved. And so that really blossomed into some amazing like moments of sharing crafts and just enjoying the process of learning.
So many of you have discussed how these different events in your life have influenced the direction that you go with your work, and it's good advice to the students who are moving forward and maybe might be still in fear or worried about how they will grow in their work. Now thinking about this moment and this discussion and this exhibition that you're a part of, 19 under 39 is an opportunity for burgeoning artists to submit to a juried exhibition and showcase their work to the community of the university and the broader Montana community. So this opportunity also provides the chance of being selected for the Purchase Prize or People's Choice Award. Why is this type of opportunity important given what you have discussed? You want to go ahead, Aspen?
No, so I really wanted to use this opportunity to be able to bring our Sedlish, our Kootenai voices back to our homeland. And so knowing this place where we're at, right where this entire university sits, there's thousands of years of our history that happened here. And a big part of during a colonial time was our removal. And so I knew that this winning piece, that it needed to be in this area where this happened. It's not too far from here is Samcher, Schuihuitin in Chedlaos, where Grizzly Bear tracks bridges. And so we crossed that bridge. And I know that having these stories, this information here, it really just is a part of that land acknowledgement and bringing back our ways of knowing about this place and bringing it to the public and informing people of who we are, our skedlich ways of knowing, and then the artwork that not only has the language, but it also, the language in my work goes beyond that. It's like, what is that telling? What is the history behind that word? And so when we left our Aboriginal homelands from the Bitterroot Valley, that's what that piece says. And there's a lot that goes into what that meaning of the Bitterroot and having the removal, there's so much that goes into it. And I want people to know this. And now I feel like historically, a lot of times Indigenous voices are left out. They're not really hearing from actual Indigenous artists. It's always been kind of Western, non-Native artists who have said, this is what the Indian, Indian lens looks like. This is Native people, when they don't know nothing about the deep culture, about the stories and art perspective. And so I feel like Mamak allowing this opportunity to sit here, to have our voices and share our perspective through the way we see our history, I think it's a huge step in acknowledging and having that reconciliation of the tribes and the knowledge that's been here for thousands of years.
I've been thinking a lot, and like Nicole mentioned, we had some previous conversation before the panel that just overall, this kind of an exhibition was really important. And like Raphael mentioned as well, with this idea of it being purchase prizes and collecting contemporary young artists of the time, has been really important, hopefully for the museum collection, but also just for me as a participant, being able to be made aware of a lot of artists in my peer group that I wasn't aware of before. That's been a really amazing part for me, being part of this exhibition. But then also just the potential of the purchase prize and this highlighting of, even if we, for the other artists, what's 19 minus 4, the other artists who aren't here tonight, who weren't a part of this, of the purchase prizes, that everyone was able to get an opportunity to speak about their work was very important, that everyone had that opportunity to be highlighted, I think was a really successful part of the way that the show was run. And then as a prize winner, for me, it was immensely gratifying, and it was a really big moment for me after many, many years of being just a working studio artist and showing work, to get the call to say, "Oh, you got second place." It was the jaw on the floor kind of a moment, and that leads me to what I was saying before. In some of the conversation before in our panel, we were talking about just all of the immense amount of behind the scenes work as emerging artists that it takes to just get into these kind of exhibitions. In some artist talks that I've given before, I'll show a slide of a screenshot of a Google document where I keep track of all of the exhibitions that I've applied to show young artists, especially students, just the behind the scenes. I'll apply to 50 exhibitions a year and get into 2 or 3. And it's just all of this immense amount of rejection, immense amount of trying to put yourself out there, advocating for yourself, and making sure that you're able to push your own work and being able to be brave enough to put yourself out there. And so opportunities like this, again, where all of that work is then gratified and highlighted, was an immense honor.
Yeah, I would follow that up with, again, thanking the Hansons for having this vision. I've been in Missoula for about 15 years, and visiting family around Montana, and I don't know that I've seen this much support or this much highlighting in a number of ways, whether it's recognition or a purchase prize, or opportunities to speak to the public, of young artists. And not only that, but I feel like the expansive vision that the jury brought to the show is sharing some really neat, a variety, a spectrum of art that I haven't seen in Montana before. And I really appreciate that. I know my particular work is kind of niche. When people hear I make brooms, they're like, what does that mean? It's like, I make garbage cans. I don't know. So being able to talk about it and being able to push those boundaries and being able to have one of those applications that I'm submitting in the dark on the Tuesday evening be seen and appreciated for the questions it's asking, the conversations it's encouraging people to have, the pushing boundaries of whose work and what type of work belongs on museum walls. All of that, I just really appreciate the approach that was taken in this entire exhibition.
I just want to go off of what Grace said. It was really encouraging to see something sort of within grasp as an artist that is starting out in the beginnings of my career. And it's been amazing seeing all of the other artists that were chosen and hearing their stories and listening to a diverse array of... I've been listening on Instagram to the talks, and it's just been really, really amazing.
What about being the people's choice, Rachel? The people have spoken and they have chosen, and you are it.
Thank you.
What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. It's really heartwarming.
Well deserved also.
No words for that, right? Right now. Well-deserved and amazing group of women here who have outspoken themselves visually with their work, and today in the panel. I definitely have learned a lot so far just by talking with all of you, and I hope that the audience would agree as well. There will be room for questions later for any other nitty-gritty questions you might have for each one of them. I do want to ask Raphael, where are we on time? Okay, excellent. I'm going to go on to some of these connection questions. And my question here is, Maya and Grace, you both touch on the influence of craft and motherhood in your work. Can you define and/or explain the concept of craft versus fine art, and elaborate on the most significant ways motherhood has shaped or challenged the art you create? Maybe just piggyback this, and do any of these different methodologies or techniques that you each employ offer different insights into that topic?
Do you want to go? Do you want me to go?
I kind of want you to start because you're in academia now. And I feel like the line between art and craft is an ongoing conversation, but it's also gray. It's kind of subjective. So bring your MFA brain and I can chime in.
When she says MFA, I am a solid 4 weeks into my MFA, so I don't know how much accreditation I have. But the conversation of art versus craft, I got my bachelor's at the Oregon College of Art and Craft. So that was a conversation that was literally imbued in every waking moment of my bachelor's. So I am a big supporter of craft. I think that fine art cannot exist without good craft, right? Or even in kind of opposition to it, when we think of some art that is staunchly anti-craft or specifically of, quote unquote, poor craftsmanship, it's in context of craft. And it's also that kind of idea of you got to know the rules to be able to break the rules. I'm a firm believer of that as well. But overall, I think especially in this kind of contemporary landscape, like Grace was saying, the line between fine art and craft is so blurred at this point. And I also, have to say hasn't been said out loud, that all four of us being female artists and craft often being associated with feminine work, female artwork, I feel like this really kind of exemplifies the idea that there isn't necessarily a line. Like it all is just kind of like we are all very good artists and we all touch on craft in one way or another in all four of our practices. And that I think that delineating and saying that there is fine art or there is craft ends up being reductive, right? That I think that they have to influence each other one way or the other. As far as motherhood goes, which is also something that I don't think we've explicitly said, that 3 of 4 of us are mothers. For me, the maternal experience is integral to everything that I do in my work. Thematically, my work lives under the large umbrella of motherhood, and I explore different niche topics within that kind of realm. But, when you're looking art historically at themes of motherhood in art, like again, craft goes right in hand with that. Domesticity goes right in hand with that. All of these kind of quote unquote lowly labors, kind of invisible labor aspects all go in together. So I love thinking about craft in that realm as well. And just how it all kind of informs each other, right? What about you, Grace?
Yeah, I would agree. And something I'm always playing with the forms that you're seeing me currently use is very much kind of elevating or questioning what's usually considered a very mundane domestic object and asking questions about that. And I think in some ways, what about the kind of the invisible labor of motherhood could that also be speaking to? I think we could have that conversation as well. But one thing we did talk a little bit about ahead of time when we're talking about kind of the logistics of trying to make a sustainable living as an artist is how it's further complicated by motherhood, both when you're thinking about the time it takes to submit 50 proposals and get two, or how to participate in residencies, which historically are built, I think, ideally for men without too many ties, and how participating in this piece of the art world that's really important in exploring and creating and connecting in the work that you do, being difficult for people who are potentially primary caregivers of young people. There's kind of layers of how motherhood can inform the work itself, but also impact how you interact with the art world.
Thank you. And the next question, so that we can make sure we make room for questions in the audience, is for Aspen and Rachel, and that is, your work is different in context and approach, yet you each carry the thread of community connection and culture in your work. Can you expand on the motivation behind rooting your work in community, as well as explain how that unfolds in the creation of your work, in your methodology or in the visual appearance of your work?
So a lot of my larger pieces, I wouldn't have been able to create them without having accessible spaces. So my large maze vase, that's thanks to Hungry Hill, who does a lot of work within the community in Butte. And so, like with anything that you create, it takes many hands to, touch those materials. If you're knitting a sweater, somebody has to feed the sheep, somebody has to shear the sheep, somebody has to clean the wool. And in my work, I always try and carry on the theme of reciprocity, so trying to give back to the community that gives to me. So I do a lot of my larger works out in open studios, so people can ask me questions, and then we can bounce ideas off of each other, and I can encourage them and teach them a new skill. And being a good steward of the skills that I already know. So I just love watching people's faces light up when they figure out a knit stitch. And I think it all started with my grandmother, because we found a way to connect through craft. And I think there's always going to be that community connection with craft.
Yeah, and community for me is really at the heart of my work, because it's about language and culture and who we are. And without my people, my sqalqali, then who am I? So like knowing who we are is a part of that community and our seasonal cycles, our knowledge that has been passed down through the thousands of generations. We're all connected. We all are there for each other. We have roles within the community. And growing up, it has always been about, what is my role as a Sedlish woman? What am I going to do for my people. And so my artwork, when I'm working through it, I think a lot about what are some of those ways of knowing or language or something that's important to our people. How am I going to depict this, and how is it going to relate to how my community is seeing these things? So there's kind of a question that we kind of moved past about kind of the academics of art making. And what I was going to say, I'm going to kind of just throw it out there, is that Western systems aren't the same as our indigenous sovereignty, our tribal sovereignty, in the ways in which you become a master in the art making. We have our own processes that have been used forever, and we don't need the validation of Western systems saying you're an artist or you're a master in this, because our weavers and our ways of going about many years of being under that mentorship and being told kind of how to be, what to do, it helps to see you become sort of that master in weaving and learning or whatever kind of art form you choose. So my community and the way that they see my art is really important to me. I'm wanting to depict things that, you know, are different, my different relatives. I hope that they think about it and think about those oral stories that they could see coming through my work, or those people those leaders that we've heard about all of our lives. It's now putting a face and a visual to that oral tradition. And so I feel like, community is just the most important, because my elders, they were my teachers. They are the experts in what it is to be Skelliu. No.
I'm going to move a little bit further down. Where are we at, Rafael? 11 effort. Okay. There's so many questions that I have here that I want to ask, but obviously it's not going to happen. But they're really excellent at intertwining all of these responses, so you got a lot of that information here. I'm going to skip down to the critical questions. I did want to talk about this idea of voice and also this concept of advocacy, self-advocacy. I'm going to rewrite a question, so I'm just going to ignore what I have here. Ultimately, based on the discussion that we've had here and the topics that you've mentioned, how would you, as a female artist, really speak to our audience about what it takes to have a voice, advocate for yourself, and also make sure that you are, able to participate in the art world, whether you are a academically trained artist or whether you are an artist that is a self-taught artist or an artist that learned through community and connection. So, I mean, either way, whichever way you're learning, you're needing to move in the art world. And what is that like for each of you? What are the challenges that you've faced, and where do you see that going for yourselves? You want to go ahead, Aspen? We'll just start in order.
So I feel like with my upbringing, I've always kind of been outspoken, and sometimes it does get me into trouble of, just speaking too much about, just what I think. And I think it's important, especially us if I'm speaking to kind of indigenous youth and like indigenous artists especially, it's up to us to have that intergenerational healing and being able to bring forward our voices, because for a long time, since the first contact, we haven't been able to share our perspective. We weren't even allowed to speak our language or practice culture until 1978 Indian Religious Freedom Act. And since then, it's not like it's just been, an open spot at the table saying, go ahead and speak. It's taken years of, having finally these opportunities and people who are maybe progressive and allowing Indigenous people to have their voices. And our ancestors fought forever to make sure that we are able to keep our culture and language alive. And so I would say just don't be silent. Say what you want to say. Show it through your artwork, because it's the way that we keep our ancestors and our communities proud, because in order to keep that information and that intergenerational knowledge transfer, we have to be saying these things, passing it on. And for non-native artists and people, I'm always saying or informing that we shouldn't be taking from Indigenous peoples, because it is our opportunity and it's finally our time to share those things that we want to share, that we feel is important to share. And it's up to us to share these stories, these designs. And yeah, I guess it's just some of those issues have always been that. And like obstacles is, where's the voice? Where are people wanting to hear these things? And I've seen a big change. It just seems like the last few years here in Missoula, where now there's a lot more Sedlish language. There's a lot more acknowledgement of who we are. And so that does mean a lot. And I would say just keep trying your best. Find your role within your community, whether it's a tribal community or non-native. Find what you care about, what you're passionate about, and that'll always guide you.
Yeah, just to echo what Aspen's saying, I think there's so much power in, like you were saying, highlighting your individual culture, whatever that is, right? There's this conversation that the more personal that your work is, the more universally understood it can be. When people try to be universally understood, it can feel more washed out, right? But as far as this question of advocacy and how to navigate the art world, coming from my lens specifically of becoming a mother, at 20, right? That was a very intense way to try and figure out how to navigate the art world. And I like to say that it was a really difficult time to become a mom in the middle of school, but there's a big blessing that I have of kind of starting my career as an artist as a mother, right? I didn't have to shift. I didn't have to become used to navigating as a not a single person in the sense of relationship, but a single person as in my children are appendages of me, right? And then have to start on that single track and then figure out how to work my kids into my career. Like my career and my family grew all at the same time, and so I don't know what it is to be in the art world and not be thinking about what residencies are accepting mothers, what's the art historical canon have to say about maternal art, all this kind of stuff. But to be a little bit more succinct, I think what I would say as far as directing advice to people who are trying, or especially students who are trying to figure out how do I navigate the art world, is just remember that there can be a narrative of there is one way to be an artist, right? Again, Grace, I think, kind of talked about this idea of the male genius, right? The single man that is moving his way through the art world and has no obstacles because he has no ties or conditions, right? And something that we talked about in the pre-conversation was this idea of, especially in, again, the realm of motherhood, making work in the off hours, right? Like kitchen table artwork or making work during nap time. You may not become a parent or a mother, but there will be parts of your life where you're trying to figure out what can I do to make this work, because you can't always, unless you have a trust fund, just jump straight into the art world and say, this is going to be my practice, that's everything I'm going to focus on. You've got to be able to balance or negotiate within yourself different aspects of your life, whether it's parenthood, whether that's other careers, whether that's, what have you. There's endless options to that. But just keeping in mind that there is, every artist that you talk to, they're going to have a different path of how they make art and how they make art work. And that there just isn't a single track of being a quote unquote professional artist.
I'll try to be succinct because I know we're low on time. And I would say, kind of following a lot of what Maya said, the fact that I didn't feel like I could make a living as an artist right out of undergrad for financial reasons, because I didn't have a trust fund and I had a bunch of student loans, meant from the start that I was trying to figure out how to continue to study and work with craftspeople and learn and create my own practice, when I was also having a day job, and finding ways for that day job to have shared values and have shared themes with the work I was making. And in that way, I do feel like I was really lucky that I got to continue making connections that I think continue to inform my work through what I learned while trying to balance and make a living in a practical sense. I'll just keep it there.
A big portion I've had struggled with advocating for myself is just with my schedule alone. And I think all of you guys as mothers and working jobs, it's tough to make art, but it's also tough to make it to meetings. So being really on top of your schedule and letting your boss for your main job know when something's coming up, and just being completely honest with everything happening in your life so you can fully show up. But also, if you can't fully show up, they know why.
I think it died. Oh, no. You make a good point of showing up, right? And I think that's a big part of the whole picture, is trying your best to show up when you can. And it makes sense that that be one of the biggest challenges to get to where you are. But when you do, you've realized that the possibilities are endless. I think now's a good time to open it up.
Folks, I'm going to bring the mic around if you have a question. So just raise your hand and I'll come over and any questions out there for the panelists? Okay.
Sorry, this isn't a well-formed question. I was just thinking about it, but my question is to Rachel specifically. We're all three girls from Butte as well, and we saw your memorial in Butte and how beautiful it was, and your start to doing like canvas and oil paintings, and I just want to know what your inspiration was in like deer and rabbit like paintings, because they connect to my heart. They're very beautiful, very pretty, and maybe how much time you kind of put into those, because they are oil paintings and that takes a lot of work, and you're very technical with it, and the fact that I don't know if you went to school for it, but that's just very inspirational to us and our community as well, and I think that's a big reason to why you won the People's Award, the People's Choice. But yeah, that's kind of my question. Sorry, it was kind of scattered.
Did you vote multiple times?
I didn't vote at all. I didn't have the chance. But I wasn't.
I enjoy painting jackrabbits and deer because they're kind of mysterious to me. This painting in particular was a Spike in Phillipsburg, and he was a bit of a celebrity at the time, and he ended up making my family's memorial like even more special because he just showed up out of the blue. But they're just really fun animals to paint, and there's so many. I don't know. They're just so mysterious, and so I paint a lot of deer and rabbits.
Other questions out there?
Who do you remember as like your first inspiration, and who is your most recent inspiration? Any of you can answer, or all of you can answer.
Like in the art world specifically? Or?
Yes.
I would say that my earliest, I guess, memory of doing art has been with my mom and my great aunts, my yaya, my grandma. I've always danced at powwows, And so dancing fancy, the earliest art I've done was cultural arts. So learning how do I create regalia, how do I bead, all those things. I feel like my entire life has been a culmination leading up to this point of learning that cultural knowledge. How do we create the designs of our people? And now it's really coming out. And so my, I guess, later inspiration has been, I guess I would just put it on my husband. Like, he's my rock, and I love that we have all these deep conversations. We were talking through, the panels and native art and where it's going, contemporary artists. So I feel like he's a big help in getting my thoughts together, and we talk through all those things. So I would say, yeah, those are my two biggest inspirations of my art.
I might, when the question was asked, the first kind of original inspiration that came to my mind was also my mother. And I hadn't had that thought before. So it was really good to hear you say that too. Growing up, I was always drawing. And at one point, my mother, who didn't finish college, did bring out her portfolio of art. And both having my youth hobby of drawing kind of supported just in, giving me materials and time, but also seeing that there's a history in my mother's work. Her father was a painter, seeing that from an early time, I think it made me feel like this is a great use of time, and it's inspiring. Whether or not, I had any concept of making a living doing that later on, but just kind of having that supported and having a model, too, that I'm not alone, that someone I love and look up to enjoys doing this as well. And as far as current, there are a lot. It's a number of folks who are kind of in a similar position, whether it's kind of navigating fine craft or however you want to describe it, or people who are balancing parenthood with art making. Anywhere where I can find like glimmers of hope or connection, give me that spark that I need to keep working during nap times or at midnight.
I have to jump on the bandwagon of parents as original. My parents are both artists, and so growing up in that very specific ceramics-filled home was obviously very informative for me as a current ceramic artist. And then, currently, I'm really fortunate to live with my three muses of my three kids who inform my work a lot, and my relationship with them is constant inspiration for what I bring into my work. A lot of self-reflection that ends up kind of all being tied into just my kind of logistic, how do I be a good mother, and then also how does it inform my work thematically. But as far as kind of contemporary artists that I look at as well, I've for years been really drawn to Janine Antoni, Kiki Smith, Louise Bourgeois, all those amazing big hitters.
My original inspiration was my parents, too. They're both really hard workers. My dad is a carpenter, and he makes really amazing, beautiful wood sculptures now. And it was amazing seeing that when I was young, seeing him just take a brick of wood and turning it into something that was functional, or turning it into a little bird. It just blew my mind. And my current inspiration, I'd have to say, is like everybody at Hungry Hill. It's really... Seeing how hard Butte has fought for spaces like that is inspiring.
Are there any other questions out there? Yeah, Sarah.
So now that the show is coming down, Pout, what are y'all's plans? Do you guys have any of this work that may have been in the show traveling somewhere else? Do you have another exhibit coming up here in the state of Montana? So I didn't know if you could share a little bit more about where we can see your work in the future.
Yeah, the artwork, the 3 remaining that aren't going to be in the collection, they're going to go over to Radius. So I have an exhibition with 3 other ledger artists, John Pepion and Terrence Gardapi, over at the Radius. So that'll be in January. So you could see them there, and as well as 12 of my works. And then my husband and I have a solo exhibition at the Missoula Art Museum coming up in April. So it's about our Buffalo history and uses. So there'll be some cultural arts mixed in with my ledger art. So I really suggest going and checking that out. And then also just being a part of the Santa Fe Indian Market now. That's going to be a big yearly thing for me to do. So yeah, that's just some of the places on the...
I am going to be deep in my MFA for the next few years. I do have a solo show scheduled for next summer. It's going to start off in Oregon, in Salem, Oregon. If you find yourself in that area, it's going to be at Salem Art Association. And then that show is going to travel to Echo Arts in Bozeman sometime winter of 26. So keep an eye out for that.
So many exciting things to look forward to in the community. In a couple of weeks, I'll be with at the conference for MEGDA, which was mentioned earlier, the Montana Art Gallery Directors Association, which is sponsoring most of the work you're seeing here, and a number of other pieces for touring the state of Montana. So the membership of those galleries, the directors of those galleries, will decide whether or not they would like to have it over the next 2 years. So it could end up in a number of communities around the state. We'll kind of wait and see this fall. Otherwise, I will be busy with a new family member for a little while as well.
In October, I'll be doing a residency at Tinworks in Bozeman. So October 2nd through the 19th, you can come visit me, and I promise I won't cry. But I'm really excited. This is the first time I've had like a full 3 weeks to commit to creating ceramics, so really exciting.
Other questions? Oh, there is another question.
How do you guys feel about social media and having to market yourselves as artists in this day and age? Does that change how you make work, when you make work, and how you promote yourself?
That's a big one. Yeah, I feel like social media is that kind of double-edged sword, right? Where personally, I've definitely had opportunities come from social media and being kind of diligent about posting at least every once in a while so people can be aware of what I've got going on. But there are moments for sure where I have to be kind of self-reflective and be like, am I making things or am I performing in my studio for myself and for the benefit of my artwork, or am I doing it to make a good picture online, right? And those are the times I'm like, I think I'll step back for a while, maybe not post for a few weeks, kind of touch some grass and come back to reality. But I do think that being online is definitely necessary in this day and age, and it's a big networking tool for sure.
Yeah, I would second that. I would say I'm probably not the strongest candidate for like meeting all of the best practices of social media. I am a bit of a wallflower unless I'm representing my work, which is in social media land is kind of a mix of things. So it's kind of confusing for me. So I try to make sure I'm using it as a platform to connect with folks and let them know what I'm up to. But I'm also not making reels with my face on them ever. And I think it's a great way to connect and be present in a wider world, to reach a wider audience, to make relationships with people who aren't always in the same room or the same town as you. But I also don't put all of my eggs in that basket.
Yeah, I like to use social media just to inform my own community of what I'm up to, what I'm making. So I feel like that's like the most important part that I like to use it for, but definitely connecting too. I went to the Santa Fe Indian Market, and it was cool to just meet all these inspirations that I've kind of like seen through social media. And they knew who I was too because of social media and some of those hashtags. And it's just kind of funny what hits and what doesn't. Like in one of my TikTok videos, I just like dug up Bitterroot and it got 790,000 views. And then something I spent a long time trying to, do, then it's like, 800 views. So you just never know what's gonna hit, but it's interesting.
I think it plays a pretty important part, or at least for letting everyone know where you're at, what art shows you're attending, and unfortunately everybody's on social media now, so it's kind of the best marketing tool for letting people know where to find you. I've had this fun little kind of like scavenger hunt in Butte because working a full-time job, it's hard to cultivate enough artwork for a show. And I've been trying to save paintings, and I have a little room upstairs in this old apartment in Uptown above the Isle of Books bookstore. And if somebody wants to buy a piece, I tell them to go to that room, and I'm honestly kind of surprised at how much artwork has sold. But yeah, it's a great way to interact with your audience.
Well, folks, thank you very much for being here. Thank you to the participants, the panelists. Let's have a round of applause for them. Your careers are all amazing and heroic in different ways, but in such a wonderful way. So we're very grateful that you're here. And thank you for sharing your lives and your visions with us. It's been really marvelous. I do want to say we've had the 19 artists coming in and talking at the museum during the installation. The installation is indeed coming down tomorrow, but we have one last talk, right? Rachel Marjama is speaking tomorrow at 2 p.m. at the Montana Museum of Art and Culture. So if you want to hear more from Rachel about her practice and her work and her vision, please join us for that event. In the meanwhile, thank you very much, and look out for 19 Under 39 in short order because it's coming back. Thank you.